Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nekima Levy Armstrong. I am a civil rights attorney, activist, and founder of the Racial Justice Network. I'm also the executive director of the Wayfinder Foundation. Thank you all for tuning in to today's show. As you know, we have a very special guest, Brandon Mitchell, who was one of the 12 jurors who deliberated in the case against Derek Chauvin, the former veteran of the Minneapolis police officer who killed George Floyd on May 25th of 2020. As you know, we have been following the Derek Chauvin trial very closely, both in terms of speaking out publicly, but also in the streets, advocating with the people. And now we have a chance to hear from Brandon Mitchell, who was the lone native-born African-American man who served on the jury. He has been doing a number of interviews to share his perspective. I'm really excited to have him on the show, and we'll be able to hear directly from him and ask some questions of what it was like for him to serve on this historic jury. So let's please welcome Brandon Mitchell to Rise Up. How you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm good. It's a beautiful Friday here in the Twin Cities. And I'm very grateful that you are taking time out of your day to be a part of this Rise Up broadcast. We have a wide audience from people here, primarily in the Twin Cities, but also people from other states. And a lot of the people who watch Rise Up are active in the movement for racial justice and demanding police accountability. And so you have a very receptive audience to the things that you want to share. So why don't we start out and talking just a little bit about your background, where you grew up and, what you currently do professionally.
Yeah, so I grew up right in North Minneapolis. Spent all my life there really pretty much. And then currently I'm a high school coach still in North Minneapolis at North High School. And that's kind of what I'm passionate about. I'm just passionate about my community in general. And I always have been.
So you talked about during one of your previous interviews that you missed the end of the basketball season. Is there anything that you want to share to your players? Because you couldn't tell them that you were serving on the Chauvin jury, when you had to miss the end of the season.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't tell them any details. But I just want them to know, like, the significance of this trial hopefully builds a better future for them. As they're going into adulthood. I just want them to be able to be themselves and freely be themselves as they're growing up. And they know, they know how I am. I'm doing everything for them. I got them. I'm gonna hold them down always.
That's wonderful. I also read that you have actually been pulled over by the Minneapolis Police Department. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences with the police and how you got through those experiences?
Yeah, so I know when I was a young adult, me and all my friends, we would get pulled over once a week, twice a week, just because. And I know my mom, she would make me drive her car just to make sure that it was insured. There was no tail lights or anything out like that, to make sure that everything checks off, and to make sure I was safe in that regard. And even still, we would still get pulled over. It was part of the norm during that time. And it's just right now, it's a matter of changing that, and hoping that younger men, now growing into that young adulthood, don't have to go through those type of things. Like I said, that was the norm amongst me and my peers when I was 19, 20, 21, 22, up until I was like 25, once, twice a week, we getting pulled over.
How did that make you feel?
During the time, it was so normal. I didn't know any better. I didn't know that that it was even wrong, I guess, because it was that normal. And it was like it was happening to everybody like me. It was just like this just comes with the territory, and it was like a list of rules we would have to try to not get pulled over. So it's like if you're driving, you're passing by a cop, make sure you take your hat off. Or when you get pulled over, you got to make sure you speak a certain way so they don't get extra aggressive with you. Stuff like that. Where it's like that shouldn't have to be a thing, but you don't even know any better because at the end of the day, you're just a young adult. You're just going through what you're being taught. And it's just unfortunate that you have to go through that.
Absolutely. I mean, there's an aspect of dehumanization involved with having to suppress and stifle who you really are in order to make it out of a traffic stop, not being arrested for nothing, and also being alive at the end of it. And we have plenty of Black people here and around the country who have had traffic stops that have wound up being having an aggressive outcome where somebody is beaten. And then what I think about Philando Castile, how he had been pulled over dozens of times on Larpenteur Avenue. He knew the routine in terms of what you're saying, how to speak to cops, and he went above the law on the day that he was pulled over, and he still wound up being killed with a woman and a child in the car with him.
Yeah, and the stories like that, where it's like that should just never happen. It should never happen, and we got to get to the point where it never does happen. Guns shouldn't be drawn during the traffic stop. Stuff like that shouldn't be a thing. It just doesn't even make any sense.
Right. Well, and it reminds us that people still see us as second and third class citizens in Minnesota and in this country, even though we just deserve to be free and be able to get from point A to point B just like everybody else.
Right. Yeah. They, like you said, they see us as second and third class citizens. It makes no sense. And I would never want, the kids that I'm mentoring in North Minneapolis and I coach, I'm hoping that by the time they're actually adults, they don't have to be treated as such.
Absolutely. And I read that you are going to give them a little bit different advice than what you were given growing up since your experience with being a part of this trial.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was in my early 20s, like my younger brother's 5 years younger than me. And I would be telling him like, he'll be riding around with me or whatever, excuse me. And I would tell him like, no, these are the rules we got to follow. Like do this, this, and this, give him off the checklist. Like when you're driving, you got to do these things. And now 10 years later, I would never want to tell a kid that he should have the freedom to be who he is while he's driving. He wants to have his hat on. He wants to have his windows down, whatever it is. You should be able to do that because that shouldn't cause for a death wish. You shouldn't have to be abused or killed just for freely being you as you're doing whatever. Like that's ridiculous.
Absolutely. And I think our experience as Black people differs so greatly from the average white person who's pulled over. A lot of times we will hear white people saying that they're just given a warning. Even if they're speeding or violating the law, they're treated with respect and dignity. And that gulf in terms of our experiences can make it difficult when we hear about police violence and aggression, or even the kind of deadly circumstance that George Floyd experienced, and getting people to believe that these things actually happen to Black people in our community.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why I'm thankful that, phones have cameras now, because that's the only way it seems that anybody will be able to believe us. Because, I mean, these things have been happening for years and years and years. And for people to just now be believing that, I mean, it's only to do the phones. Because, I mean, nothing's new. It's been going on. It's happening to, my parents, grandparents. It's been going on. It's nothing new. But we're happy to catch it on film. That's the only difference.
Yes. Thank goodness for Donnella Frazier, who was just 17 years old, young African-American woman who was taking her little cousin into Cup Food Store on May 25th of 2020. And she could have kept going right on in the store when she saw the police accosting George Floyd. But instead, she walked her cousin to the front of the store in order to protect her eyes from being able to see what she was witnessing. And then she turned back around and she held that camera steady as she captured the brutal death of George Floyd at the hands of Derek Chauvin and the other 3 officers. So I have to commend that young lady for doing what she did, because we might not even know what actually happened to George Floyd. I don't know if you remember the first accounts that came forward from the Minneapolis Police Department, it said a press release that said that a man had died as a result of a medical emergency when he was being arrested and taken into custody. And that's actually what Chief Arredondo believed when I called him that day. And I wouldn't have known if a woman named Ashley Quinones had not tagged me in a Facebook post to say MPD killed somebody. I looked online, I didn't see any information. And then I called the chief, and the chief only had the false information that his officers told him had happened. And so once Ashley then tagged me in that video that Donnella Frazier put together, that's when I saw the truth, and tears just started streaming down my face when I saw what actually happened to George Floyd. I was mortified. Now, you couldn't watch the whole video from my understanding. So tell me about that. What happened when the video came across your feed?
So when the video started circulating, and people, posted, and they'd be like, another black man dying, I would purposely go past it just because that's just something I tried to avoid seeing with my own eyes. And then I was scrolling one day, and accidentally it started playing just by itself. And I seen 15, 20, 30 seconds of it. And I was like, oh, I'm definitely not watching this. Like, this is flat out. This is crazy to watch. It was too gruesome for me. It was too gruesome, just flat out. I was like, let me hurry up and click off of this. And it was just too much. It was like, that's not something I want to feel with my free time, watching an officer kill a black man. I'd rather fill my free time with something else. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't nothing new. It wasn't something that I hadn't seen outside with my own eyes before. I had seen brutality similar to that before with my own eyes. It just, like I said, this was just caught on film.
Mm-hmm. So you watched a portion of the video, and then fast forward several months, you receive a questionnaire to potentially serve on the jury. So tell us about that questionnaire and what was going through your mind. I think it was about 13 pages long that every potential juror had to fill out. Yeah.
So when I got that, I actually was like, I still was unsure if I even wanted to fill it out and turn it in. I was sitting on it, and they sent me a letter saying, hey, no, you absolutely have to turn it in, because it was getting close to the deadline or whatever. And I was like, it's not really optional. And I knew deep down inside, I knew that I needed to turn it in. I knew how important it was. And I was like, I need to do this, but it's like, do I really want to? Mm-hmm. And I talked to my mom about it, and she was like, yeah, you should. And I was like, yeah. Then I just kind of embraced it. As I started filling it out and reading the questions, I was like, I'm gonna really embrace this and really and take this kind of seriously and try and figure out how to be on this jury.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank goodness that you did take the time to fill out that questionnaire, because you were the only native-born African-American man on that jury of 12 people, as well as 2 alternates.
Yeah.
And so without your perspective, we don't know what might have happened when it was all said and done. So you filled out the questionnaire, and then what happened? What was the next step in the process?
So you fill out the questionnaire, and then a few months later, they call you in for interviews with the lawyers, with the attorneys. And during that time, I was just like you set the date, and I was like, all right, I don't know what these interviews are going to be like, but I want to go in there. I want to be prepared and just be me. And I think I should be able to be on there. And when I went in, I guess they were like, yeah, both the attorneys were like, yeah, put them on. I was shocked. I was like, okay.
I mean, I'm shocked because, we talked for weeks about, so you were juror number 52.
Yeah.
So we have talked for weeks while they were going through the jury selection process about juror number 76, who was an elder Black man. He was a veteran of the armed forces. And he was, seemed to be a mild-mannered man. He talked about experiencing racism. He talked about, knowing that the police profile people. He talked about cops getting off for killing people. And he said, maybe if I'm on that jury and I'm like behind the scenes, I can figure out why this keeps happening. And so the defense used their preemptive strikes to get him off the jury, and the prosecution did not object. And so we were devastated. Like, we have lost a Black man, a native-born Black man who knows what it's like to experience police brutality, from this jury pool. So I know I was definitely concerned because everybody kept saying people of color. I'm like, people of color are wonderful, but there is something unique about our experience as native-born Black people, given the history of slavery and Jim Crow, and then going even deeper, being a native-born Black man and having encounters with the police and how that shapes your understanding of what happened in your perspective.
Yeah, I agree 100%. 100%. It's just different when you're a Black man. That's just, and you're a native-born Black man. It's just your experiences and the way that you're taught when you're growing up, and the things that you have to deal with are just different than everybody else. Then that's just a fact.
Well, I'm glad that both sets of lawyers were able to see your ability to serve on the jury, to be open-minded. I think the fact that you had not watched the whole video was probably a factor, because there was a Black woman who had gone in, as a prospective juror, and she was like, look, I can't unsee that video. They were like, bye. I'm like, that would have been me.
Yeah.
Because they would have said no, because I would have said, he did it. It's so, that just would be my perspective. But we need people like you who are going in with an open mind, who can be calm, who can weigh the evidence, and be a part of the deliberating process, and because that's what ultimately led to guilty, which, many of us are so grateful for. So let's talk about, once they told you that you were going to serve on the jury, then what was the next step in that process?
So once they told me I was going to serve, like I said, I was super shocked. It was kind of a surreal moment, like, wow, like I can't believe I'm actually on this jury. So I took a few days to just like kind of soak it in. And then once the trial actually started, that's when I started to get a little nervous, like, oh wow, like this is real. And I was just like, this is what I'm here to do. I'm here to be here. I was meant to be here. This is what I'm here for.
Now, I read that you said that you felt like you were called to serve on the jury. Can you talk a little bit about that? I understand your mom is a pastor. You're a man of faith. Unpack that for us.
Yeah, I don't think it was an accident that I was there, for sure. I definitely think it was just something that was meant for me, especially with me being a person that's in the Black community all the time. I'm always in the community. I'm always doing stuff. It just seemed like there was too many things lining up. Like even when I didn't want to do it, it was like something is pushing me towards this and almost making me do it. And it just seemed like it was way above me. And it was just like, this is what I'm meant to do. It's a calling for me. And I don't know if it's for anybody else.
I just got chills when you said that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's real how it was. Like I said, when I didn't want to, back to the questionnaire, when I didn't want to do the questionnaire, and then they start sending me letters like, no, you got to do it. And I still was like, man, I don't really want to, but y'all making me. Like stuff like that. It was just little signs like that where it was like, it's all signs point to this is for you. Then me being picked during the interviews, I didn't know it was gonna be picked. It was like, why y'all pick me? I'm just little old me. But it's all these signs like this was meant for you. It was meant for you to be here. Little stuff like that.
So tell us about your first day in the courtroom, because we heard from, opening statements from Jerry Blackwell, who is a well-known African-American attorney who normally doesn't even serve as a prosecutor. This man has his own law firm, and we had some of the best lawyers also from around the nation who were a part of this prosecution. So tell me what you're thinking as you're sitting in the courtroom on this first day, listening to the information.
So the first day, listening to opening statements, I actually was like, I was curious to see what the defense was going to say and what they were going to do. I thought they had a really good opening statement. It was like, oh, they must have some type of really good evidence that's going to come about at some point. That's going to be like, wow, how do we think past this evidence? That's what I was thinking. Like they must got something really good, and it just never happened. But I mean, like I said, it was a pretty open mind that first day. But I remember when I first walked in the courtroom, though. I was hit with low-key a wave of emotions just when I very first walked in that first time. It was like, I was angry, I was mad, I was sad. I was hit with a bunch of emotions that I didn't expect to be hit with. just off the strength of I was walking into a trial for a black man that was killed by an officer. Just that alone, I was hit with a lot of emotions. That like I said, I really wasn't expecting.
So what was going through your mind when you had to watch that video in its entirety? Because I know for us on the outside looking in, it was very traumatizing to have to watch George Floyd be killed from a variety of different angles, whether it was from bystander video footage or from body camera footage. It was we all knew what the outcome was going to be every time we saw a snippet of video. How did you deal with that?
So I remember the first time they played the video in court and I finally watched it in its entirety. I mean, I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna make it through the day. I was ready to walk out then, like this ain't for me. Just flat out, just because it was too much. Like, this is just watching it that first time and hearing him yell out and seeing all these things, and I was just like, this is crazy. Like, then seeing the body cam footage, like different angle, and I'm like, this looks even worse from the body cam footage. It was just like, it was. I was speechless. Like my breath was taken away from me. It was just like, I don't know if I can watch this anymore. It was tough. It was extremely tough. Just those first times watching it. I don't know if there's actual words that could describe it, just because I don't have any words to describe it. It just was that tough, and it was just like, I don't know what the heck I got myself into.
How did you prepare yourself mentally, knowing that you had watched it the first time, but you were going to have to watch it many more times during the course of the trial?
I didn't know what to do. I was like, I would try to look at a wall. I was trying to, take notes during that time, just trying to find ways to look away, but then you still hear it. And by then, the video by heart. You still hear the sounds. You know what's going on with certain sounds. When he's saying certain things, you know what's going on during them times. And it's like you can't escape it. It's like, so in my mind, I was trying to find ways to escape. Escape, basically. It's just finding ways to escape this courtroom right now, even though I'm physically there, just trying to find ways in my mind to just not watch the video and not have to tune in. But it's a TV everywhere, so you got to watch it. You got to tune in. And it just was what it was, and it's like I gotta push through.
Now, how did you feel about the testimony that came forward from the bystanders? What was the most compelling testimony for you?
Well, the most compelling was Dr. Tobin, but I thought early on, Dr. Tobin was the most compelling. Yep. But I thought early on, Donald Williams, I thought he set a good tone. I thought he kind of set the stage for the prosecution going forward. Then when they got to Dr. Tobin, I thought he kind of like sealed their case up, and I thought it was pretty much the trial was done at that point. I didn't know what the defense would be able to come and counter with for that.
Now, I noticed that a lot of Black people in particular were cheering for Donald Williams and his courage and him standing his ground when the defense was trying to paint him as an angry Black man, when in reality, he was standing there advocating to try to save George Floyd's life. So what about his testimony moved you or was compelling to you?
I mean, it was that right there. It was the fact that he knew, from his perspective, he knew how he was feeling during that time, and he wasn't going to let the defense tell him or push him into saying that he felt a different way. And it ended up turning out later that was a major part of the defense's case. They wanted to prove that the crowd was angry and the crowd was aggressive. And the fact that he early on said, no, that was not the case. He just debunked that from day 2 or something, whenever he came up there. I thought that was just so important that he just stood his ground on that and didn't allow the pressure of the attorney to make him say something that he didn't actually feel.
Now, when the defense was trying to paint the crowd as angry and belligerent, did you buy into that at all, or did you see through what the defense was trying to do? Because it was offensive for us, watching from the outside and seeing these people be stereotyped, and kids who were really just saying, stop killing this man, let him go free, get him up.
No, I mean, I definitely didn't buy into it because nobody out there was aggressive. So if nobody was aggressive, then the most vocal person, which was Donald, he already told us that he was not being aggressive, and he already explained what he was doing. And it definitely was nobody else that was out there even even kind of doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, no, that just is not going to stick. Like, it didn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Did you find his experience as a mixed martial artist compelling in terms of knowing the kind of moves that Derek Chauvin was using on George Floyd?
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. Especially the details he gave, I thought were very interesting, very helpful. I thought all of us jurors, we all took notes on exactly what he was saying. I felt like during those times when he was talking about, the chokeholds and different stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Were you moved at all by Donnella Frazier's testimony, like towards the end, where she said that she stays up at night thinking about what happened, apologizing to George Floyd that she didn't physically intervene? And I'm thinking this child is about to go into adulthood. She is still a teenager, and she's carrying the weight of what police officers who are supposed to protect and serve did to a Black man in our community.
Yeah, and I felt really bad for her. I felt really, really bad for a young adult that to see something like that and to have, luckily she recorded it. No, I felt really bad. And it's like, she's not the only one that has seen traumatic experiences like that at that age, and stuff like that carries on for possibly for the rest of your life. And I mean, that's a super traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. And that's going to shape the way she views police officers and how they handle Black men for the rest of her life. Mm-hmm. So that's a situation whereas whenever she has kids or whatever, where she might tell her kids, I mean, it's just an ongoing thing. She's going to tell her kids, like, be careful of the police because they do these things because of something she's seen when she was 18, 19 years old, or however old she was. But that's that cycle that has been going on for years and years and years. And we just happened to catch it on film this time. Mm-hmm.
Now let's shift a little bit and talk about Dr. Tobin's testimony. We noticed from the outside that he was like a master teacher instructing his class as he went through very complex medical terminology. And he even did, some demonstrative things by telling you all to grab your neck. Did you participate in that? And what did you find most compelling about his testimony?
Yeah, so Dr. Tobin, he was like the teacher that everybody liked. He came up and he, like you said, he spoke very scientifically, but he kept it very elementary where everybody understood it. And he got all of our full attention completely, where we all turned our seats a little bit and we were locked in on everything he was saying and hanging on to every word. So yeah, when he asked us to like touch our necks for an example of a certain spot on our neck, I mean, we were all so captured into what he was saying. We all moved at the same time, like, yeah, like what's going on with our necks right here? Like what's next, Dr. Tobin? And we just were locked in like that. Mm-hmm. And even after the judge was like, y'all, you jurors, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Everybody pretty much still did it just because he was that capturing in the way he was speaking to us, and everything just made sense. And it was just like, wow, like it was like an exciting class. It was like a teacher literally that everybody liked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember doing that, like, applying pressure to my neck and seeing how you really can't breathe, just even squeezing your neck a little bit. So it just helped me to just get a glimpse into what George Floyd was feeling when he was saying, I can't breathe. I'm feeling all this pain in my body. And I remember the defense trying to break up the flow of what Dr. Tobin was doing when he's like, I don't want jurors, grabbing their neck. And the judge gave that instruction. But like you said, you all participated in that. And I remember after I heard Dr. Tobin's testimony, I was thinking, I don't know how the defense is going to come back from that. I don't know if they have a rabbit that they're going to pull out of a hat. I don't know how they can combat such clear and compelling testimony from the foremost expert in the world on pulmonology.
Yeah, I didn't see a way they come back from that either. But I did think the prosecution continued on a little bit too long after Dr. Tobin. I was like, they started coming with too many experts that just kept saying the same thing. I was like, I mean, we got the picture at that point.
Mm-hmm. I think that part of what they may have been trying to do is preempt some of what they thought the defense was going to put on as far as expert testimony, because the defense had like 14 or 15 medical expert witnesses that they had on their list. They wound up not calling them, but I think that they were trying to get ahead of that possibility. Someone who was watching the show said that they saw that Attorney General Keith Ellison thought that Charles McMillan, the 60-year-old black man who kept saying, you can't win, get up, that he was the most compelling witness. What are your thoughts on that?
I wouldn't say he was the most compelling for me. I thought seeing him on the stand resonated with me, however, just because another black man trying to give his wisdom to George Floyd, or what he viewed as wisdom, during the altercation, that alone, that resonated with me very much so. But it was so early on with so many other people. It just didn't, I almost forgot that he went up there.
So you were focused on Dr. Tobin, and then also Donna Williams, the mixed martial artist.
For sure.
So let's talk a little bit about Philonise Floyd, the brother of George Floyd, and his testimony. I read that you were deeply impacted by that testimony. We're going to show a brief clip of Philonise Floyd testifying, and then I want you to walk us through why that impacted you and how that impacted you.
Absolutely.
Okay, we did not hear what was being said. I think we had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but
I know it was being said. But no, for me, so like as they show those pictures of like George Floyd and his mother, then they later on showed a picture of the brothers together. Just those different pictures of them as they were growing up, along with the stories he was telling of how they would go play basketball together and do just different things that brothers do. Just regular everyday stuff. He wasn't talking about anything besides his brother. That's it. He just knew him as his brother. Hearing those conversations and knowing that they grew up as normal as can be, for a young black man, it reminded me 100% of me, my older brother, me, my younger brother, and I felt like it could have been any one of us in either of their shoes. And been any one of us on the stand testifying about the death of the other one, and it would have been the same. It would have been the exact same stories. It would have been the exact same. It would have been no different. And just seeing that, it just touched me so much, where it was like I had been holding strong for most of the days in terms of my emotions, and I just couldn't hold it anymore. And tears just started coming down my face, and I literally lifted my mask up to about here so it could catch my tears, because I didn't want the reporters to see me in there crying like that. But it was 100%. I was like, this 100% could have been me and my brothers easily, and it just would have been. And it's just like, man, this is tough. It was by far the toughest moment of the trial. And
he humanized his brother.
Absolutely. And I felt him 100%. I was hanging on every word he said. In fact, I had to look down at my notes just to stop looking at him as he was telling the stories, because it was hitting me that hard.
Wow. And so, as a juror, you said you had to lift your mask up because you just had tears flowing.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. My mask was like this. I lifted it up like this and held it so it could catch.
Wow.
So they couldn't catch me crying like I was.
That's deep. So I'm going to have Josh run that clip back. So let's see if we can get sound with it as well, so people can see what.
Next on the stand, Floyd's brother, Philonise.
He just knew how to make people feel better.
He was what's known as a spark of life witness, meant to show the jury more about Floyd's life and family.
That's my mother. She's no longer with us right now, but that's my oldest brother, George. I miss both of them.
Man, I almost started crying just in that little moment. I'm like, oh my goodness, seeing him as a baby with his mom.
Yeah.
because as a mom, that impacted me, you know, hearing him crying out for his mom and then later finding out that his mom had passed away and how close they were. So that spark of life testimony was very compelling. And that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to be compelling. It's supposed to humanize the person. Because aside from that, you know, that all we know about George Floyd, if you didn't know him personally, was seeing him on the ground with the white man's knee on his neck, crying out in agony. And nobody wants to be remembered like that.
No, not at all.
That testimony brought it back to this is the person whose life was snatched away through this process. So what happened when you went home, you know, after that day when you were crying? Was that the only day that you cried as witness testimony was coming forward?
Yes, that was the only day I cried during in the actual courtroom. But that weekend, so I think that was like a Thursday or Friday whenever he testified. That weekend was an extremely rough weekend for me just because I couldn't find a way to decompress. You know, I had set up I tried to like set up, you know, a day for myself where I just, you know, watch some movies, eat some good food, and just try to relax. And I put one of the movies I put on was this movie called Two Distant Strangers.
Yeah.
I didn't know
Netflix. Yeah. I just heard about that movie. Isn't that about policing?
Yeah, I didn't know that though. I didn't know that. I just knew it was a black film. I just put it on, and the guy keeps having like a recurring dream or something where he keeps getting killed by police in different ways no matter what he does.
Oh my goodness.
And so I get maybe 5 to 10 minutes deep into the movie and I just flat out just bust out into tears, and I couldn't stop crying for maybe like 2 hours. I mean, of course I turned the movie off and I couldn't stop crying. And at that point I was like, on Monday, I'm not going to this trial on Monday. I had my mind made up for a split second. Like, I'm not going. I'm about to call my mom and tell her, listen, I'm not going on Monday. I'm letting you know first. I can't do this anymore.
Wow.
It was affecting me that much. And I'm really not overall an emotional person. So it was like for me to bust out and not be able to stop crying, it's like, this is really affecting my health. And I was like, I don't know if I could do this. Because I value my health. And in my mind, I kept telling myself like they keep killing us for no reason. And it was like I couldn't get it out of my mind. It's like I can't, and I was like, I can't get this out of my mind. So I can't go here on Monday and still be thinking this.
Right.
So yeah, it took me about a couple of hours, and I just sat down. I had to find something funny to watch so I could I don't know what I put on. I don't even know. Put something on, and I finally was able to calm down and was like, if I'm not there to represent Black America, I don't know what's going to happen. And so I was able to talk myself into still showing up.
Thank goodness you were able to show up. And maybe you put that. I heard about that movie from my children. I haven't been able to watch it yet because we deal with so many real world situations of police killing people. I have to limit how much I watch in my spare time that's not related to real life because it's traumatic. But maybe that helps you purge, some of the pent up emotions that you have been carrying throughout the trial, and you needed that other trigger so you could release and then, gather yourself to go back on Monday because we needed you there.
Yeah.
As the lone, like we said, native born Black man who has had experience with police, but who also has an open mind. That is incredible that you were able to find the resolve to show up again. Yeah,
I 100% was minutes away from saying I'm just flat out not doing it because it's too detrimental to my own health. Yeah, it was a tough moment.
Were there any moments during the trial where you felt any sense of like joy or relief, or was it just like, we just got to get through this? We got to hear what the defense has to say. I know when I saw the defense side, I was like, now come on. If those jurors, after hearing this, they didn't thrown in everything but the kitchen sink to explain how George Floyd died, other than a knee on Chauvin's neck. If those jurors go back in there and they somehow, I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. As a lawyer, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So did you have, and when the defense fell flat, I was relieved. Like, thank God they didn't pull any kind of rabbits out they had. I don't even know why they didn't try to hurry up and settle this and plead out after Dr. Tobin's testimony and the strength of the prosecution's case.
Yeah, no, I kind of thought the same. So once the defense went up and they started getting to their witnesses and they started getting to their experts, it really just fell flat. And so at that point, I was waiting for a moment like this big bomb that they're going to drop. And then when it didn't happen, that's when I started to feel relief. Like, oh, let's walk. We finna walk in and out of this. Let's go deliberate. Let's go. Like, because there was nothing. There was nothing there, and there was nothing where it was like, okay, well, they did have this witness and this evidence that was kind of compelling. There was none of that. So it was like, well, the rest of this is easy. Let's get in, get out. So at that point, I was pretty relieved, just because it made it easy. It made being a juror easy at that point. It's like this case is over with.
Well, and that's one of the differences between having the Attorney General's office take on the case, where you don't have typical prosecutors, right? I think that that's an important point that we can't underscore, because if this case had remained in the hands of Mike Freeman, there would have been a lackluster prosecution. George Floyd would have been on trial, not just by the defense, but also by the prosecution. And there likely wouldn't have been a guilty verdict, even with what we all witnessed. And so having it placed in the hands of the AG's office, where they could get the foremost attorneys in the world and experts in the world to bring forward this case and the evidence, like you said, it made it easy.
Absolutely. It 100% made it easy, to the point where I was like, we walk in the deliberation room, I thought we should be in and out of there less than an hour, just because I didn't know what there's nothing to talk about. I felt like it was an open and shut trial.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that it made a difference having half the jury be people of color?
Yes, I do. I do think having a diverse jury like that definitely made the conversations different than what they would have been had it not been as diverse.
Tell us more about that. How did the quality of the conversation differ? Because you could have gone in with 11 white jurors and you know, and trying to explain some things that they should already know, but because their experience with police is typically so different, we have to, you know, give way too much explanation for things that are obvious to us regarding our experience.
Right. Now, I mean, luckily we didn't go in there talking about, you know, experiences too much, but just based on the experiences of everybody that was there, and because it was diverse, it allowed for the conversation to flow in a way that whoever was leading the conversation, they were leading it a way that made sense that would make sense to most people. It wasn't being led in a way towards something that probably wouldn't make as much sense. Mm-hmm. So say if it was possibly an all white jury and just me, it might have been led a different way. Therefore, opinions might have went differently. But because of the way the conversation was had and the way it was led, it went where we all were on the same page pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. So was the jury foreman, was that a white person or a person of color?
Yes, it was a white guy.
And did he follow the plan that the prosecution laid out for how to review the evidence? Remember, they said, you know, you can do what you want, but this is how we recommend breaking it down in order to, you know, make your deliberation process go more smoothly.
Yeah, a little bit. We started following it, and then we kind of took it into our own hands and switched it up and did it our own way. In terms of everybody had specific evidence that they wanted to pull up, that they thought was compelling to them. Everybody had different different videos. There was maybe like 7 or 8 videos. Everybody had different body cams that they thought was the best body cam. So everybody had their different points and we just kind of went around and let everybody just give their point and say what evidence was best or most compelling to them. What testimonies.
Could you watch any videos in the deliberation room, or was it all based off your notes and your memory of what you witnessed?
So we had access to the entire evidence pool. So we had all the videos, we had all the different trainings and stuff like that from MPD. We had everything, and we went over. We watched all the body cams in their entirety. We watched maybe 2 or 3 of the cell phone videos in their entirety, and we looked through a couple of the training manuals as we were going through our deliberation.
Mm-hmm. And you think that made a difference in terms of people getting on the same page quickly?
I think that helped. I think honestly, don't know if that helped everybody get on the same page quickly. But since everybody had been so bottled up, I think everybody just wanted to talk and just get it off their chest. Just say, this was a piece of evidence for me. But they wanted to do it just to be sure that we were all on the same page. And I think that's where that diversity comes in, because everybody was so adamant on making sure that we were on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about the votes that you took. So from my understanding, you took 2 votes before you made your first final decision on the manslaughter charge. What was the preliminary votes?
Yeah, so first preliminary vote, we came in right away from the courtroom, went to the deliberation room. It was 11-1. One person was still unsure. They needed some more time to just, I guess, to think about what they wanted, which way they wanted to go. So at that point, we went around the room, gave everybody a chance to say their thoughts. By the time we made it around the room one good time, we had everybody on board for 12 guilty.
For manslaughter?
For manslaughter.
And was that the first day of deliberation?
Yes. Yeah, so that was day one. We actually were in court all that day, and we figured that out within an hour or so. And then we were done for the day at that point. We decided to break for the rest of the day.
Because you guys took an extra 45 minutes that day, which we thought was a good sign that maybe there was consensus on at least one of the charges when you stayed a little bit later.
Right. So, and that's funny because people actually got that wrong. We were staying later, waiting for our food. So we were already done way before then, but we had to stay in the room and wait for our food because our food wasn't there yet. We were just waiting, just talking amongst each other. But we already came to the conclusion on the manslaughter well before we walked out. What
kind of food did they serve y'all?
So at this point we were at a hotel. It was like whatever restaurant was at the hotel. They had a variety of stuff. They had like some steak, fish, chicken.
Okay, good. So it was high quality food. They didn't order McDonald's or
no.
Like y'all deserve like filet mignon and lobster after everything that you have been through.
Yeah.
So then what happened the next day? Like, did you go to sleep feeling like a load was lifted, or like, okay, now we got to get to the heavier charges? Like, what was running through your mind when you went to your hotel room that night? Because you guys were sequestered, right?
Yeah. So at this point we were sequestered in a hotel. That's a good question too, because like I said, I walked into the deliberation room day one, like we should be in and out here pretty quickly. Day 2, I walked in like it's not going to be as quick as I think.
How did you know?
I knew that just based off the fact that the manslaughter, it wasn't just an instant thing. It wasn't like we walked in, everybody just said, "Yeah, this is for sure. Manslaughter is automatic." It wasn't like that. So the manslaughter took longer than I thought it ever would. I thought that would be the easiest thing. I thought that was a no-brainer. So based on that, I was like,
divide in terms of, people holding out versus people being like, "Yep, he's guilty of manslaughter." Did you see a racial divide in that conversation?
No, I wouldn't say a racial divide, just because it wasn't enough people that were unsure for it to be a racial divide.
So that 12th person wasn't a white person who, it was 11-1 at first.
I mean, I'm not gonna say whether they were white or black.
Okay, I'm not gonna pry further, but in my mind, I was like, huh.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say whether they was white or black, but they had their own, they were unsure. So so I knew coming in the next day that it was going to be different than what I had thought in my mind, in terms of everybody's just coming in and we all on the same page and it's just all good. I didn't know what to expect, honestly, the second day coming in. But we got started right away in the morning, trying to tackle the third degree charge, the third degree murder charge. And that charge took the longest out of all of them. So it's worded kind of confusing. So I think that's essentially what slowed us up. It's the fact that it's worded in a way that isn't just straightforward to everybody. Everybody, didn't get it right away. It took a person a little bit of time to comprehend it the same way everybody else comprehended the charge.
Right. I mean, and we were concerned about them, honestly. And so I don't know if you know the history, but what happened initially was that Mike Freeman charged Chauvin with third degree murder. He actually tried to, hatch a plea agreement with him for him to plead and serve 10 years in prison, in federal prison, on a third-degree murder charge. Once we pressured the governor to put the case into the hands of the attorney general, we said we want stiffer charges based on the severity of this situation. And so the AG's office then bumped it to second-degree murder charges, and they got rid of third-degree murder charges. But then, in the meantime, I don't know if you remember Muhammad Noor, the only officer who had been convicted up till this point, Black Muslim Somali officer who killed a white woman, probably accidentally, Justine Damon. He actually filed an appeal, and the court against his third-degree murder conviction, and the Court of Appeals affirmed his conviction. Now, it still has to be decided by the Supreme Court. Right. So in the meantime, the prosecutors added third-degree murder back into this case, and we were terrified. We're like, what if the jury does not want to go with second-degree murder and third-degree murder gives them an out? And then we're also concerned of whether the facts apply, neatly into a third-degree murder conviction. So it's interesting that held you all up the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was trying to figure out, like you said, so what applies to that third degree, and then getting everybody on the same page on agreeing to that. But in terms of the second degree, we all agreed on that with no problem. We got to that. Yeah, we got to that and everybody was like, yeah.
After you guys had worked through the third degree murder elements?
Yes. So after we worked through the third degree murder elements, and I guess everybody had spoke their mind and we had got through all our evidences and all that. The second degree, we were like, absolutely.
And then how did you feel when you all reached that decision? Did people, give each other a high five? What did y'all do in that jury room once you knew that it was guilty, guilty, guilty?
I know right away, I sat back and just kind of had a smirk on my face and was just like, I'm so glad that this is done with. I'm ready to go home, get up out of here, and go hang out. I think most people in there were everybody took a sigh of relief because it was done. It was done. And actually, so before we turned in our final vote, we did a preliminary one for the second degree, and it came back where all of us said guilty on the preliminary. And before we did the final one, we were like, let's stop, let's take lunch, let's take a break, let's pause for a second before we do what we're about to do, because this is going to be a historic moment. So we actually took our time eating lunch, and we were trying to turn in the final numbers. We were trying to wait till like around 2:00, just because we wanted to actually spend the night in the hotel to just relax and take a minute to just soak it all in without anybody knowing. But eventually we got rushed out of there and rushed down to the courthouse. But we were hoping we could spend a few hours just nothing, with no pressure. We know it's done, and just relax.
Wow. I know that when we got word that the jury had come back, we were like, Lord, please. We thought it was a good sign that you all had come back relatively quickly. Now, of course, I would have loved to have seen guilty, guilty, guilty the first day, right? But I'm like, you know what? 12 people who don't know each other, different life experiences. It's hard to know what's going to happen. But I felt much more confident when you all came back in the middle of the day on the second day, knowing that, the world was about to hear what you all decided, and to hear guilty, like every time I think about it, all I can do is give God praise, and it just reminds us, like, we saw what we saw. Yeah. Regardless of what they tried to say, we know what we saw. We know that this didn't have to happen. And we know that someone needs to be held accountable, particularly Derek Chauvin, but also now these other 3 officers in the pipeline for what they did.
Yeah. It was it was a historic moment. And it just felt good once it was done. It was just like, this is what was right. And it just felt really good.
Now you went straight to your mom's house, right? After you were able to leave. What was that like?
It was funny. So I went over to her house, and I had a different type of bounce in my step, because for the past few weeks I had been like kind of just dragging and just dragging and going through the motions, and I would still stop over there, and they'll just be like, I wasn't myself. So when I went over there this time, I just had a little bit more energy And they didn't know how I was feeling, so they were like kind of treading lightly, like we don't know, we don't want to ask too much or do too much to maybe break them down or anything. But I'm like, I walked in like it's all good, y'all. Like y'all can ask whatever questions y'all want now. It's all done with. Like let's get it all out the way now. So of course they had a million questions, and we just kicked it for a few hours.
That's incredible. Now I noticed in one of your interviews you said that Derek Chauvin, from the beginning of the trial, had some swagger in his step, but then at pivotal moments you started to see that change because he looked confused when the verdict was read. Like, huh?
Yeah.
They said I'm guilty. We're thinking, of course you are. Did you notice that difference?
Absolutely. I noticed after a week and a half of trial, I noticed his confidence lowering. There was definitely some times where I seen him kind of looking really confused, looking nervous a little bit. I could definitely see it on his face a few times. Where it's just like, okay, he kind of lost his confidence now at this point. Mm-hmm. And definitely, when it was read, when the verdict was read, he definitely was like kind of looking like, huh? Is he reading this right? So,
did you look over at him on purpose when the verdict was being read?
I think everybody kind of looked, just because you're curious to know, how's he going to react. I mean, mm-hmm. So I think everybody kind of looked over at him just to see what would he do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I noticed when the videos were playing, he had such a cold look in his eyes, like there was not a soul behind his eyes. Like, did you pay attention to that? Just his coldness and his demeanor as he had a grown man underneath his knee.
Yeah, I tried, like I said, I was trying not to look too much into the video, even though, I had to watch it. So I didn't look into his eyes that much when he was on the video. But the fact, to me, if you're sitting there and somebody's unconscious and dead and you're still on them, to me, that's just cold-hearted, and that's just cold in general. Mm-hmm. It doesn't get more cold than that.
What did you think about Minneapolis police officers testifying? Because as we started this conversation, you've been pulled over a number of times by police, just minding your own business. You know something about the culture because you've seen someone be hemmed up by police, them being aggressive. I've seen the same thing. I saw Minneapolis police one day grab a 10-year-old by his shirt, a little black boy, and slam him on a police car like it was par for the course. So how did you weigh the testimony of the chief and the other officers who testified against Derek Chauvin?
I actually thought the testimony of the chief was a big deal. I was like, wow, that's kind of huge. I was very shocked by that. I was very shocked that he testified, and I thought that was huge. But I hope that it wasn't just for for the public to see and just for TV purposes and all those type of things. I hope that actually pushes them to actually make some changes overall to all their practices. So yeah, I hope it wasn't just for the public to see and a publicity type thing. Mm-hmm. That's all I can hope for. I mean, yeah, it was big to see them there, but it's only big if something happens from it.
Mm-hmm. Now, and I agree wholeheartedly. I really hope that they change the way that they do business and how they treat people. I mean, all we can do is wait and see, but we know that we will never forget this moment where the community played a huge role in bringing this to the world's attention, where the world took to the streets after watching that video. 26 million people globally got out in the streets to demand justice for George Floyd. And some jurisdictions even changed their laws on the books, like banning chokeholds. New York City also becoming the first city around the country to end qualified immunity. Maryland overturned its police bill of rights. And so change is continuing to happen as a result of George Floyd's death and the public's worldwide outcry for justice. So thank you for the role that you played, even with being reluctant initially and not wanting to subject yourself to that. We can't blame you, but we can say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your service. You have literally saved lives as a result of your courage and your willingness to put yourself in that position. So we're eternally grateful for you. Pray that God continues to bless you in all that you do. You have the Wholesome Podcast. People should follow you on Instagram And is there anything else that you want to say as we close out our time together?
No, I appreciate you for having me. And like I've been saying, I hope this really sparks some real change. People are saying this could be a historic moment. It's only historic if change happens. Otherwise, it's just another moment. So hopefully something changes.
Well, thank you so much, Brandon. We appreciate you from the bottom of our hearts. And we hope that you're taking care of yourself after the trauma that you went through. You deserve to be able to rest. I hope you're able to go take a vacation and clear your mind and just do your best to try to have some peace after what you've been exposed to. So thank you for your service.
Absolutely. I appreciate that.
Thank you all for tuning in to today's Rise Up podcast. As you know, our guest was Brandon Mitchell, and he broke it all the way down for us to see what really happened through his service on the jury. And then that verdict, guilty, guilty, guilty. And now we wait for sentencing to take place on June 25th. Thank you all for